Probably the most fashionable antidepressant group at the moment is the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, such as Prozac. That was the famous one. And they work by blocking the reuptake of the serotonin that has been produced in the end of one nerve cell, crosses the synapse to the target neuron on the other side. That's sending out the serotonin signal to fire this. But then the serotonin gets taken back up and stored in vesicles ready to be used again. Now, what the reuptake inhibitors do is kind of block that channel, so there's a lot more serotonin hanging around the synapse, and this tends to prolong its positive effect on mood. The effect may not be immediate. It might take several weeks for it to work, if indeed it is going to work at all. So that's the question. Do these antidepressants work? They're much debated. They have side effects. They may be addictive. But most interesting of all, they do not seem to be effective with mild depression. Placebos are just as good. In this diagram, this is the average placebo effect with all those sort of greeny circles, data points. And the red line is the averaged, the smoothed curve for antidepressant drug effects, the red triangles. And it is only when you start with a very high level of severity in depression, as measured by something called the Hamilton Rating Scale of Depression. Only at high levels on the Hamilton scale can you see a difference between the active drug and the placebo. But it does seem that the difference is due to the placebo ceasing to work. In other words, the only reason that antidepressant drugs work better than placebos is the placebos cease to operate at high levels of depression. Here's a plant that you might recognize from your garden. Brightens the garden a little bit. It's called St. Johns Wort, or Hypericum, the official Latin name. And it seems to work as well as the antidepressant drugs, possibly by a mechanism very similar to an SSRI. And it may even have fewer side effects. There are negative results that come out from time to time, less often in German-speaking countries. Interestingly, nobody's quite sure why, but there is a much longer tradition of using St. Johns Wort as a treatment for depression than in Britain or America. The drug companies aren't much interested in St. Johns Wort because they can't slap a patent on it. It's a natural product. Obviously they're not prepared to promote the efficacy of St. John's Wort. It's worth noting that the commercially available ones that you would buy in the health stores and so on vary enormously in the concentration of Hypericum, and some of them almost certainly are not effective. When they are effective, you have to consider that just because they are natural, it doesn't make them safe. If it's an active compound, then it's likely to have side effects, some of which will be harmful. And in the case of St. John's Wort, it will interact with other drugs, particularly antidepressants. If you had them from the doctor and then taking your own St. John's Wort on top, you might be doubling the dose. They're also known to cause photosensitivity, that is, make you more sensitive to the sun. You might get sunburned on a cloudy day if you're taking St. John's Wort. Now, an American psychologist called Martin Seligman, back in the late 1960s, where, interestingly, he was working at the Maudsley Hospital in my first few years there, he noticed that dogs that were subjected to inescapable shock, they're sadists, these animal behaviorists, you know, failed to take effective action when the conditions were changed such that escape now became possible. And he said that they had learned to be helpless. And this became a model for depression, both as a human clinical phenomenon and as an animal model in studying the biochemical effects of depression. So Seligman reckoned that depression was caused by a feeling of powerlessness, being unable to control events, and that you could acquire this from unhappy life experiences. Later on, of course, the people studying learned helplessness discovered that there were personality effects that were important, and that it really depended on how you attributed the causes of things around you. Pessimists tending to blame themselves rather than bad luck for any negative outcomes, and that hence they are much more prone to depression.